Welcome to the deep dive. We are tackling a mountain of sources today, and they all detail the colossal fallout from a digital scandal, a case that really it became a real-time collective social trauma in modern China. The sources we've amassed are they're vast. We're talking everything from Weibo analytics and journalistic deep dives to, sociological analyses and legal commentary.
A huge range.
A huge range. And we're not here to just recount the history of the crime itself, which is, it's sophisticated deception, alleged blackmail. Our mission today is to look at the immediate aftermath.
Right.
Following that July 6, 2025 arrest of the suspect known as Sister Hong, we are focusing entirely on the societal reflection this created. So how a massive breach of trust was processed from, the eruption of viral memes all the way to a genuine public health scare.
And that foundation is so essential because for anyone who might not be familiar with the initial event, the persona at the center of this was, she was universally known online as Sister Hong or Hong Ji. This was a digital figure who operated with immense sophistication. The whole brand was promising intimacy, connection, and crucially, discretion. She cultivated a very specific and, as it turns out, a highly vulnerable type of male clientele.
Who were they?
Often young men, professionally aspirational, just starting their careers, and deeply lonely. So when the deception collapsed on July 6th, 2025, leading to the suspect's apprehension, it wasn't just some quiet legal procedure. As you said, it was a societal explosion.
A detonation.
Exactly. So the core mission for us, looking through all these sources, is to really understand the sheer force of that detonation and then meticulously trace the complex, long-lasting societal fallout that followed in the weeks and months after.
Okay, so let's unpack this with the immediate aftermath. We have to start in the digital sphere because the sources are, they're absolutely emphatic about this.
They have to be.
Right. Within hours of the arrest, the scandal didn't just break the news. And this is the quote, it detonated the Chinese internet. It was a complete and immediate consumption of the public sphere.
It wasn't just a story. It was the only story.
It was the only story. And to really grasp the velocity of this, we have to look at the metrics. We've got a specific data point that just conveys the scale perfectly.
The hashtag.
The hashtag. The primary one for Sister Hong, or Hong Ji, it became what the sources call a supernova on Weibo. It amassed, and this is incredible, over 200 million views.
In just days.
In a matter of days. Now, just, think about what 200 million views actually represents on a domestic platform like that.
It's a huge portion of the user base.
It immediately signals that this was not some niche scandal, confined to a gossip column. This was a rapid, volatile, collective social trauma that just demanded attention. People felt compelled to view it, to process it, and to react to it in real time. It completely forced the collective conversation.
It became a national negotiation, really. And if you look at the initial public sentiment across all the forums and the comment sections, it was anything but unified.
Not at all.
The sources described the atmosphere as a volatile cocktail. And that's the perfect phrase for it. At the base, you had profound shock, just the sheer incomprehension of the scale of it all. The duration of the alleged deception.
And then layered on top of that was, raw disgust, just pure anger directed at the perpetrator.
Of course. But then you had this dizzying blend of morbid fascination. People couldn't look away, and critically, what the sources call performative confusion.
What do they mean by that exactly? Performative confusion.
It's like people were publicly debating how they should feel about a scandal that touched on all these universal but, highly stigmatized human elements. We're talking about shame, desire, secrecy.
So it became a stage.
Exactly. A public stage for negotiating their own fears and their own prejudices all out in the open.
This sounds almost like digital culture's defense mechanism. When something hits that hard that fast, does the system even know how to process genuine horror?
That's a really sharp observation.
Yeah.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of what analysts were calling digital metabolism, concept that kept coming up, you find this common thread.
Okay.
When something feels genuinely incomprehensible, when the scale of the horror or the portrayal is just too vast to grasp immediately, the system, the platform itself, it struggles with complexity.
So it defaults to something simpler.
It defaults to the only language it truly understands, virality. Complexity is immediately rejected in favor of the immediate, the shareable, and often the consumable. The actual human aspect just gets lost in the rush to react.
And that rush immediately transformed the tragedy into iconography. This is where the dark humor starts to creep in, and it gets really uncomfortable.
That happens so fast.
The sources detail how the serious context was just instantly stripped away and the whole scandal was repurposed. What stood out were the visual signifiers, right?
The aesthetic.
The aesthetic. The distinct wigs, those overtly feminine floral kipao dresses, the bright red lipstick. These were the hallmarks of the Sister Hong persona, and they instantly became a trending look.
Which is just wild to think about.
It's truly fascinating and disturbing how quickly this translated into a collective game. You saw the rapid-fire emergence of what became known as the Sister Hong Challenge. And this wasn't a sober examination of digital deception. It was positioned as a fun, edgy fashion trend, emphasizing the performative nature of the crime itself.
Just think about the profound cultural dissonance there for a moment. The sources describe the suspect as being involved in this massive deception, blackmail, and potentially the transmission of serious disease.
Life-altering stuff.
Exactly. Yet the costume, the look of this alleged criminal, became currency. It moved immediately from a criminal investigation detail to a viral trend.
And it was everywhere.
We saw the full spectrum. There were these elaborate parody accounts, people trying to mimic the vibe for clicks. And then, perhaps the most cynical element was the immediate commercial response.
Oh, the merchants jumping on it.
Instantly. One article we reviewed cited screenshots from e-commerce sites showing the exact floral prints and red wigs being advertised. And the slogans were almost celebratory. Things like, new hot style, embrace the Hongji vibe, use my code for 10% off this wig.
Wow.
It just highlights this staggering ability of the digital sphere to immediately, and I mean immediately, commodify suffering.
That commercial co-option, it takes us right to the sociological definition of this whole phenomenon. It really does sound like society is using virality as a buffer almost.
Precisely. This is what the sources call the memetification of tragedy. It's a term drawn directly from the criminological and sociological analysis in our material. And this is far more than just surface-level joking. It's a calculated, albeit unconscious, collective mechanism.
So break that down. What does memetification of tragedy actually mean in this context?
If we elaborate on the definition, it's the process where the complex, painful, and often bloody reality of a crime, the raw human suffering, is ruthlessly compressed. It's flattened and ultimately repackaged into a simplified, repeatable, shareable digital object.
And usually one that gets a laugh.
Usually one that elicits a laugh or a quick reaction, yes.
So what function does that serve really beyond just getting clicks and likes?
Its function is dual, and it's deeply psychological. On a psychological level, it acts as a massive defense mechanism. By transforming the horror into something light and memeable, the collective avoids being overwhelmed by the sheer moral and social implications of the situation.
It's easier to laugh.
It's much easier. You can laugh at the absurdity rather than confront the fear that you too might be fooled or that society is this fragile. And then culturally, it acts as what one source called a grotesque form of cultural digestion.
That's a powerful phrase.
It is. It allows society to rapidly consume the pain of others without ever truly confronting its origins or its implications.
It's the ultimate digital defanging of a threat, isn't it? The seriousness of the disease, the threat of blackmail, the profound betrayal, all of that visceral pain is reduced to a filter, a trending hashtag, a piece of clothing you can quickly buy before it's taken down. And it creates this very uncomfortable truth. The public is using the tragedy for clicks and laughter, while at the very same time, a terrifying private reality is unfolding behind closed doors across the country for the people who are actually impacted.
That contrast isn't just stark, it's a chasm. And that chasm is a massive part of the fallout.
So let's talk about that chasm. Let's transition now from the deafening noise of the public internet to the silence and the terror of the private sphere. The speed with which the memes emerged was matched only by the speed with which individual lives were completely destabilized.
Instantly.
Try to picture the immediate, devastating internal shock experienced by the victims. Imagine that moment. You're a university student scrolling Weibo, a junior office worker on your commute, or a married professional just checking a news alert on your phone.
And then you see it.
You see the mugshot, the initial details, and you recognize the face of Sister Hong, and then that horrifying, sinking realization dawns. You potentially recognize yourself in the peripheral details or in the descriptions of videos being rumored or shared.
The sources consistently convey this atmosphere as a chorus of private terror. The personal consequences were not delayed. They were immediate, and they were catastrophic.
Especially for the younger victims, right?
Absolutely. The younger demographic, specifically male university students, they were profoundly affected. We saw reports of men simply vanishing from university dorms, just gone,
You mean dropping out?
effectively dropping out without any formal notification. They became what the campus rumor mills dubbed digital ghosts haunting campus gossip threads. Their fear of social shame, of exposure to their peers, and what it would do to their academic future, it was just that overwhelming.
And the human cost of that fear is,
Yep.
it's just immense.
It is, and it's often illustrated best by the anonymous crisis calls. We have to acknowledge the vulnerability that's represented in those legal aid hotline reports.
I can only imagine.
Imagine the scenario we found referenced. A young man, barely into his professional career, calling the hotline. His voice is described as trembling, whispering. He's saying, "I need to know my rights. I think I might be in one of the videos. What if my family sees? What if my company sees?
Oh, that's
I
heartbreaking.
just graduated. I have student loan debt. What do I do?" This shows the vulnerability wasn't just financial or sexual. It was truly existential. It threatened their entire future, their career, their family honor in a highly reputation-focused society.
And just as these men were grappling with that kind of personal ruin, the disaster acquired an even more terrifying, darker dimension, a public health nightmare.
Yes. A new layer of profound anxiety emerged when reports began to surface. And they were initially very fragmented, circulating only in specialized medical circles and highly moderated professional forums.
And what were these reports saying?
They suggested that several men who had come forward for testing had reportedly tested positive for HIV.
Hmm.
And that immediately transforms the whole nature of the scandal and multiplies the fear exponentially.
Absolutely.
Now, this point requires very careful handling as the sources themselves were meticulous about it. Here's the crucial caveat we have to stress. Causality remains officially unconfirmed by health authorities.
Right. There's no official link.
We cannot definitively link these specific HIV cases directly to the Sister Hong network.
Yeah.
Comprehensive contact tracing requires full cooperation, which they weren't getting. However, and this is the vital social dimension, in the court of public opinion, the link was immediate, definitive, and terrifying.
So the truth didn't matter as much as the perception.
Exactly. This ambiguity, this lack of official confirmation, coupled with intense viral rumor, it transformed the story overnight from digital deception and blackmail into a bona fide, devastating potential public health crisis.
That uncertainty must have just fueled extraordinary panic. What was the observable behavioral impact immediately after those rumors started to spread?
The behavioral impact was swift and it was dramatic. The fear led to widespread panic buying of home testing kits across major urban centers. People were just clearing the shelves.
I bet.
More significantly, sexual health clinics in major metropolitan areas.
Yeah.
We're talking Nanjing, Shanghai, Guangzhou.
Yeah.
They saw a sudden, massive spike in anxious, highly secretive visitors. Dr. Lin, one of the physicians quoted in the reports, described the atmosphere as one of existential dread.
These weren't routine checkups.
Not at all. These visits were driven by a profound, life-altering fear. People demanding definitive answers, but under conditions of absolute secrecy.
And that secrecy, that presents an enormous logistical and ethical hurdle for the public health system, doesn't it?
It creates an almost insurmountable obstacle. Let's just use the perspective of Dr. Lin to illustrate the challenges the medical community was facing. Clinics experienced this unprecedented increase in requests for comprehensive STI panels, all citing a profound, overriding exposure anxiety.
They were desperate for information.
Desperate for information, but terrified of giving information. The overwhelming obstacle to any effective public health response to tracing and containment was the crushing weight of social stigma. The men coming forward were often too afraid to provide their real names, their genuine contact information, or even the full context of their exposure.
So they were basically prioritizing their anonymity over potentially life-saving medical follow-up.
Exactly. The fear of social exposure, the risk of familial shame, of losing your professional reputation, or being mercilessly ridiculed online through the very memes we just talked about, it was so intense that the sources noted it often dwarfed the fear of the disease itself.
Oh, that's astounding.
They were willing to sacrifice effective, long-term medical care, including proper counseling and contact tracing, simply to maintain the illusion of privacy. And this created a dangerous, self-imposed barrier between the potentially infected population and the public health system trying desperately to contain a crisis.
Meanwhile, the formal authorities had to try and inject some kind of order into this viral storm. So 2 days after the initial arrest, on July 8th, the Jiangning police issued a statement. And it was measured, procedural, and notably Terse.
Very terse.
The statement confirmed a suspect was in custody, charged with producing and distributing obscene materials. They urged the public to remain calm. But here's the part that caused a real reaction. They cautioned that many online claims about victim counts and video scales were likely exaggerated.
And that measured response immediately created a profound chasm of trust. The public was trapped between two fundamentally conflicting narratives.
That's right.
On one side, you had the state providing a measured, contained procedural version of events, suggesting the scale was manageable. On the other, you had the internet, driven by fear, gossip, and clicks, offering an apocalyptic, endlessly amplified vision of millions of videos and thousands of victims.
And nobody knew what to believe.
Exactly. Was the official statement genuine damage control, an attempt to prevent total social panic and manage an already chaotic situation? Or was it an honest, accurate assessment based on the evidence they had? The public was left trusting neither the contained state version nor the chaotic internet version. They had to navigate a crisis with no reliable anchor of truth.
This uncertainty, it just brings us right back to the core violence of the crime, which is simultaneously physical and digital.
And that's what makes the trauma unique to the modern age. The threat wasn't just physical, the potential for disease or financial blackmail. It was fundamentally existential and reputation destroying. The physical threat was, in essence, wrapped in the existential threat of digital exposure.
A double violation.
It was a simultaneous violation of the body and of the social identity, which guarantees that the trauma inflicted would be orders of magnitude worse than a crime that occurred purely in the physical world. So, moving past the immediate crisis, let's turn to the deeper sociological analysis. Because the velocity of the shock, the intensity of the fear, and frankly, the sheer cruelty of the mockery are not accidental. They reflect these profound vulnerabilities within contemporary society.
What exactly did the Sister Hong saga hold up a dark mirror to?
I think the sources point to three big, uncomfortable truths.
Okay, let's get into them. The sources suggest that the scandal exposed three profoundly uncomfortable truths about the pressures and realities of modern urban life. The first, and perhaps the most human one, is the staggering depth of urban loneliness.
It really starts there.
The victim profile, when you aggregate it, was highly specific. We're talking about young men, often recent university graduates or junior professionals, who had physically migrated to enormous cities like Shanghai and Nanjing for work, driven by career ambition.
And in doing so, they'd left their support systems behind.
Completely. They were totally disconnected from their traditional safety net, the kinship structures, family support, community cohesion of their hometowns. They were, in the sources' words, adrift in anonymizing metropolises, trying to navigate high-pressure careers with zero emotional infrastructure.
And the deep analysis reveals that the core appeal of the Sister Hong persona was far beyond just a simple physical transaction.
It was more than that.
So much more. She offered a powerful yet illusory antidote to this immense isolation. She didn't just offer sex. She offered the promise of digital intimacy, of a Gaidinu, which is a German concept for a confidant or a counterpart, someone who genuinely listened to their anxieties, their career pressures, their emotional struggles.
So she was selling connection.
She was selling the illusion of connection. And that element is crucial. In a high-pressure, relentlessly competitive, and fundamentally anonymous urban environment, that simulated attentive connection becomes an immensely valuable commodity. Sister Hong weaponized the need for validation and belonging, proving that loneliness, even more than desire, can make a person immensely vulnerable and exploitable.
And the second uncomfortable truth is the existence and scale of this. This clandestine sexual economy that exists just beneath the surface of official morality.
The gray market.
Exactly. We are talking about a society that culturally and politically maintains extremely conservative public sexual mores. It promotes ideals of family purity, traditional structures.
But that's not the reality for everyone.
Not at all. Privately, personal behaviors have changed rapidly, particularly in urban areas. This massive disparity between the public facade and the private reality, it fuels an enormous shadowy gray market for intimacy that operates almost entirely online, way beyond the reach of formal regulation or public discussion.
And the analysis clearly shows that Sister Hong was just masterful at exploiting this specific disparity. She did not need to invent the market.
She just perfected it.
She maximized the profit from its inherent structure. And that structure thrives entirely on shame, secrecy, and the pervasive fear of being discovered.
So the shame is the key.
The shame is the engine. Because these transactions exist explicitly in the shadows of conservative norms, the participants, particularly the male victims, are denied any shred of legal recourse or public sympathy when the transaction is weaponized against them. Their pre-existing shame ensures their silence. They cannot go to the police and say, I was involved in a secretive, highly dubious transaction and now I am being blackmailed. The shame becomes the weapon that guarantees compliance.
And that profound silence leads us right to the third, and maybe the most culturally relevant truth that fueled virality and the mockery: the brutal inversion of traditional male vulnerability.
A really key point.
In most social scripts globally, and certainly within this cultural context, the narrative of exploitation often focuses overwhelmingly on female victims. But here, the scandal completely inverted that traditional script. Men were the primary targets of the exploiter, deceived and financially ruined.
And this is where society's reaction becomes so acutely revealing. The response was not pity. It was not a national conversation about protecting male victims.
No, it was widespread, immediate, merciless ridicule.
The victims were instantly portrayed across social media, not as unfortunate individuals who were preyed upon, but as foolish, lust-driven, and weak.
Why? What's the thinking there?
Well, under rigid, traditional gender norms, which insist men must be strong, discerning, financially successful, and unemotional, falling for such a theatrical deception makes them the legitimate target for societal mockery. Their shame was, in essence, perceived as a deserved public comedy, a necessary restoration of moral order.
That concept, restoring moral order through mockery, that sounds like the collective exorcism you mentioned earlier. Let's dig deeper into Professor Wen's analysis on that.
Yes. Professor Wen, who's a prominent cultural critic cited in the research, argued compellingly that the mimification is a form of collective exorcism. It's an act of cultural purification.
Unpack that.
The mechanism operates like this. Society laughs at the lonely men to assure ourselves we are not lonely. By mocking the desperation and vulnerability of these specific victims, the wider population is able to project their own underlying, unacknowledged feelings of isolation and inadequacy onto the victims, thereby hiding those feelings within themselves.
So it's a defense mechanism for the whole society.
It's a therapeutic function for the society at large, albeit a grotesque one for the actual victims.
And what about the theatrical element? The sheer performance of the Sister Hong persona, the wigs, the dresses. Why did that element make the satire so potent?
That's a great question. The theatrical femininity employed by the perpetrator, the elaborate costume and demeanor, it fueled these deep pre-existing societal anxieties about gender performance, about authenticity, and about the very stability of gender roles.
So it felt like an attack on those roles.
In a way, the fact that the victims were duped by a highly stylized, almost cartoonish persona made their vulnerability seem doubly ridiculous. Professor Wen concluded that this blend of sexual failure and gender anxiety made the entire saga a perfect storm for satire that reinforces the status quo. And the status quo is rigid, traditional masculinity.
And as this perfect storm raged, the commercial engine did what it always does. It saw the attention and immediately geared up for profit. The final step in this cycle of digital trauma is the inevitable commercial co-option.
Always.
That immense virality, those 200 million views, it was instantly co-opted by the attention economy. We were talking about market efficiency at its most ruthless.
The market reaction was instantaneous. Wigs, specific floral dresses, bright red lipstick kits, the entire Sister Hong aesthetic were flooding e-commerce platforms, often drop-shipped from low-cost suppliers within hours.
And the filter.
And the filter apps emerged, allowing users to quickly Sister Hongify their selfies for social media engagement.
It's surreal.
You saw live streamers eager to capitalize on the trend before platforms could ban the items, shouting things like, "The mystery florals dress, this is the style that's everywhere, get it before the platform takes it down, links in the cart number 3, low price."
Oh my God.
This behavior completes the profound transaction of tragedy. The aesthetic of human exploitation was ruthlessly packaged, sold, and promoted.
It's the final, most efficient method of erasing the human pain at the core of the tragedy, isn't it? It finished the journey, from a devastating human crime to a collective viral joke, and finally to a completely depersonalized, commodified trend that someone somewhere is making a lot of money from. So the commercial noise eventually quietens down, but the legal and psychological consequences, they just grind slowly forward. Let's look at the long tail of this scandal. As of the context provided in our sources, the suspect remains in detention, and the legal process is described as slow, complex, and grinding.
And that's largely due to the sheer volume of digital evidence they have to sift through.
Exactly. And at the same time, the digital cleanup is this chaotic, impossible task. The major platforms are engaged in what one source called digital whack-a-mole, attempting to purge thousands, perhaps millions, of pieces of content, screenshots, memes, copies of the videos related to the scandal.
They're trying to put the genie back in the bottle.
They are, but the internet guarantees that the content is sticky and often impossible to fully eradicate.
And this leads us directly to the distinction between the immediate, calculable losses, the arrests, the divorces, the lost jobs, and the damage that is far less quantifiable, but infinitely more persistent. This is the vast psychological iceberg that's lying just beneath the surface of the immediate fallout.
Talk about that iceberg.
The psychological toll documented is profound and long-term. It moves way beyond mere shame. We are talking about chronic, debilitating anxiety, significant post-traumatic stress disorder related to betrayal, and deep, enduring relational trauma.
And for a lot of the victims, the threat remains.
It remains enduring. The fear of subsequent blackmail. Even if the original perpetrator is detained, the copies are out there. They could be anywhere. And that could lead to persistent harassment or demands from secondary criminals who have acquired the footage. The digital footprint of this event ensures the trauma is not a memory that fades, but a constant low-grade threat in the periphery of their lives.
That threat of recurrence, the idea that the other shoe could drop again at any moment, that is truly crippling. We have to revisit that anonymous victim statement because it just cuts right through the noise of the commercialization and the memes.
It's so powerful.
This individual pleaded, saying, "To those sharing the screenshots, please stop. That's not a character in a movie. That's me. That's a moment of my life, stolen. Every share is another knife. Please see a person, not a meme."
And that's the voice of the psychological iceberg.
Yeah.
It's asking the public to acknowledge the humanity they've turned into a joke.
And speaking of raw humanity, we have to explore the most vulnerable groups of all here. The silent victims.
Yeah.
These are the voices we absolutely have not heard from in any comprehensive way, and likely never will, because their status makes speaking out politically or socially impossible.
We are talking, firstly, about men in high visibility or politically sensitive positions. Think teachers, civil servants, mid-level party officials. For them, the risk of exposure is not just personal shame. It is a profound political threat.
It could end their careers.
It could lead to professional exile, immediate demotion, or far worse, in a system where moral conduct is tied directly to political standing. The sources describe their reaction as absolute silence, driven by profound terror. Their fear is existential in a political sense, and that ensures they will never seek official recourse.
And then there are the married men in traditional, highly conservative families. Their situation is equally complex, just in a different way.
For them, exposure means shattering their marriage, yes, but it's bigger than that. It means bringing profound generational shame to their entire lineage and their extended family network.
The weight of that must be unbearable.
The weight of familial expectation and tradition acts as an immensely powerful silencer. They are effectively trapped, unable to seek counseling, unable to report the blackmail, and unable to pursue legal recourse for fear of triggering a far greater social catastrophe at home than the blackmail itself. They are the victims with the highest price for seeking any kind of justice.
The scandal also throws up these massive, critical, uncomfortable questions about digital governance and privacy in the broader national context. Here's the fundamental paradox that keeps appearing in the legal analyses. How could such a vast, organized criminal operation involving potentially thousands of victims and running for an extended period thrive and operate almost unimpeded on domestic platforms?
Within a state that possesses formidable, pervasive surveillance capabilities.
Exactly. It doesn't add up.
This is a tension that demands deep examination, and it highlights a critical legal and philosophical problem specific to this environment. The tension exists between state security measures, which prioritize monitoring all communication, and the right to individual privacy, or at least protection from digital exploitation.
And beyond the philosophy, there are practical legal gaps, right?
A huge practical legal deficiency. What specific legal protections currently exist for adult male victims of digital sex crimes, especially when they willingly engaged in a deceptive yet consensual transaction that was later weaponized against them? The legal structure is often built to protect against traditional forms of sexual violence or fraud, but it is frequently ill-equipped to handle this specific type of modern digital victimhood.
So you're saying the law itself might not see them as true victims?
The very structure of the legal code may unintentionally punish the victims for their participation in a gray area transaction regardless of the subsequent criminal exploitation. That's the core concern raised by legal scholars in our sources.
So the focus isn't on helping them.
The focus often defaults to the obscenity charges against the perpetrator, rather than comprehensive restitution or protection for the victims who participated.
So we have to ask the final overarching question. What does this all mean for the future? Will Sister Hong be a catalyst for change? Or will it just be a flash in the pan that fades away?
The sources really offer two distinct paths forward.
As a catalyst, this case holds immense potential. It could force a public reckoning. It could push authorities to enact stronger, clearer, gender-neutral laws against non-consensual pornography and digital blackmail, irrespective of the victim's involvement in the initial transaction.
And beyond the law.
And beyond the law, it might compel a vital public conversation about male mental health, about the widespread loneliness that is driving these highly exploitable interactions, and the critical need for better, non-judgmental sexual education and emotional support.
Conversely, the second path suggests the lessons will be ignored. Its specific trauma, despite those 200 million views, will simply fade beneath the immediate sensationalism of the next viral scandal that captures the public's fleeting attention.
And if that happens?
If the latter happens, the underlying societal vulnerabilities, the profound loneliness, the crushing weight of shame, and the lax digital governance will remain entirely unaddressed, just waiting for the next sophisticated exploitation network to emerge.
And when you look at the legacy of this event,
The Sister Hong saga is undeniably a landmark case of the 21st century. It is a perfect, devastating blend of the most ancient human vulnerabilities, loneliness, desire, and the profound power of shame amplified, weaponized, and disseminated by the most modern digital tools of amplification, exploitation, and rapid, merciless public judgment. It shows how little has changed in human nature, even as the technology transforms everything else. #tag outro. If there is one irreducible truth that this entire deep dive has brought to the surface, it is this. Intimacy in the digital age is perhaps the most valuable and therefore most vulnerable currency we possess. To share it digitally is an immense act of trust. To violate that trust is to inflict a wound that scientifically may heal, but socially and digitally does not scar, but bleeds data forever, because that data is perpetually accessible and shareable.
a moment of connection in the desperate search for belonging can become a lifetime of devastating consequence. A digital mask, whether it's worn by a sophisticated criminal or just a simple user, can hide a multitude of sins.
And a society's laughter.
And a society's laughter, which we saw so vividly in the Sister Home Challenge, can often be the loudest sound covering its deepest, most unacknowledged cries of loneliness and fear. We want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, one that builds on the ultimate consequence of this saga. Consider the moral transaction you make every time you consume content that's derived from human pain. Behind every trending topic, behind every sensational meme, and every shared screenshot, there are human hearts and shattered lives. So when you encounter content like this, just handle it with care. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the digital detonation of Sister Hong.